Welcome, brothers. It's great to have you with us this evening. Take a couple deep breaths. I know I need to kind of settle into the space here this evening. It's November 13th. We're on our fifth session, kind of the hump session, the middle session of our 9-week workshop, Inner Conditioning. And so we're so excited to be with you this evening. I think we got a good program for you. Everybody that's come in so far, I think I can see your names attached to you, except for one gentleman, 678210. Could you put your name on your Zoom? I'm sorry that I don't recognize you by face at this point, but I want to make sure either that or just text me your name so I can make sure I set up the breakout rooms correctly. So it's been really great to hear from you men. We've gotten some emails and messages, and hopefully we've been able to follow up with everybody and engage you. And in some cases, I was able to, again, record a conversation with Jim this week to respond to some of your questions. So we have that information out there for you too. So let's start off as we kind of settle into this space. We may have a few more men join us here a little bit late, but we'll start with a poem. And I think this one is from a poet of mine who's become a favorite. His name is William Stafford. You may know him. This poem is called Just Thinking. I'm going to actually read it twice. Got up on a cool morning, leaned out a window. Got up on a cool morning, leaned out a window. No cloud, no wind, air that flowers held for a while, some dove somewhere. Been on probation most of my life, and the rest of my life been condemned. So these moments count for a lot of peace, you know. Let the bucket of memory down into the well, bring it up, cool minutes. No one stirring, no plans, just being there. This is what the whole thing is about. Got up on a cool morning, leaned out a window. No cloud, no wind, air that flowers held for a while, some dove somewhere. Been on probation most of my life, and the rest of my life been condemned. So these moments count for a lot of peace, you know. Let the bucket of memory down into the well, bring it up, cool minutes. No one stirring, no plans, just being there. This is what the whole thing is about. Brothers, I invite you to make dedications now to our council this evening. I'd like to dedicate this council to the men who couldn't be with us this evening, that would like to be here or are unable to be here for a variety of reasons, and just acknowledge that we're all showing up the best we're able to. Ollie.
I'd like to dedicate to the people of Palestine. It is such a disaster.
Yeah. Bring in all these dedications, the ones spoken and unspoken here as we open our council. Thank you, brothers. Let's do some introductions. We'd like to hear from a few more of you. Just again, tell us your name, just where you're from, and what your experience thus far has been with the practice of presence. So we're going to bring in a few guys that maybe haven't had a chance so far to introduce themselves. Maybe we can begin with Scott Weiner. Scott.
I'm Scott Weiner from Warrenton, Virginia, but you can all read that. Part of Illumin DC, East Coast Collaborative, and yeah,
What's your experience?
When I miss council, I really miss council. Truly. What were you going to ask me, Brian? I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to ask you how your experience has been so far with the practice of presence.
It's been difficult for me.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a full cage of monkeys in my head, and I've got a partner that's just been diagnosed with lung cancer. So trying to help her through that, and trying to work with the glacial medical system, which is an absolute travesty as far as I'm concerned. They yell about socialized medicine. We're no different anymore. But anyway, enough of that sermon. I'm in.
Here.
Sure.
Thank you, brother. Lynn Binney, can you introduce yourself?
I'm Lynn and live in a college town called Whitewater, Wisconsin. Soon to be married 43 years, have 3 grandsons and 2 sons. And one of the greatest joys of my 5 years of retirement so far has been spending a lot of time helping to care for our now 5-year-old grandson. It's been a real delight. I feel like I'm beginning to get into the groove with the practice. Probably the single thing that I'm noticing the most is I'm not having very many negative thoughts at all compared with what I have normally experienced. All in.
Here. Thank you. Yeah. Jim Burns.
Good evening, brothers. I'm Jim Burns from Charlottesville, Virginia. And the practice of being present has been an integral practice for me for about 13 years. But about 9 or 10 years ago, I worked with young men, and the topic that night was going to be on prayer. And I read down to that section where St. Paul says, pray always. And I said, oh, crap, they're going to ask me about that. And I don't know how to answer that. How do you pray always? And of course, a year or two later, Father Richard, I think it was he who helped me to see that when we're present to presence, we're in a state of prayer. And it's this that Jim brings out in his book. It's just a way of being, and it literally changed my life. And so I'm delighted to participate. I'm complete.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tim Alstad.
Hi, gentlemen. I am Tim. I live in the Phoenix area in a retirement community. I'm thoroughly enjoying the experience. I've had contemplative practice before joining this group with this, and I'm finding it brings an application of truly experiencing abiding in the vine, is how I could say it. And it brings new light to Brother Lawrence practicing the presence of God. So I am getting a lot out of it, and thank you guys. Appreciate it. All in.
Here.
Yeah.
Thank you, brothers. It's a wonderful part of the evening to bring your voices into the circle and to hear from you. And again, if you haven't had a chance to share, we will be asking you to share in the weeks to come. So thank you. So now we're going to do a 10-minute practice of presence together.
We start each day with the practice of presence and bring in stillness. That is our foundation that we return to throughout the day. Practice this exercise in a quiet, comfortable place, if possible, either sitting on the floor or in a chair with your back straight. Aim to work up to 15 to 20 minutes. There are very specific reasons why we practice presence the way we do. Our experience is that it makes access to stillness easier and deeper. We put our hand over our heart because this helps release a calming hormone called oxytocin. We praise God because it humbles us. We are aware that we cannot change ourselves without experiencing God's Spirit within us. Our core intention is always to connect with our vibrant inner life, which is God's spiritual energy. Keep in mind that you may slowly say a sacred word, such as Yahweh or Jesus, on each in-breath, which makes it easier to actually take those long, slow breaths. To begin, sit quietly and put your hand over your heart. Praise God and ask Him what you would like Him to do for you inside. For example, Father, all goodness comes from you. Let your peace flow through me. Take a deep, slow breath in, breathing deeply through your nose. Follow the breath as it fills your lungs up with air. Expand your chest until you cannot take in any more air. Release the breath slowly out through your nose until all the air is expended. The out breath should be longer than the in breath. On the slow out breath, you should soon start to feel stillness and get a taste of your vibrant inner life. It is when you start to become aware of it on some level. Focus on the breath with each slow intake and each slow outtake. Focusing on the breath is essential in the practice of presence. When we are consciously focusing on our breath, we cannot think at the same time. When we are consciously present, there are no worries, anxieties, or stress, no lack of self-esteem, because none of that exists in this present moment. It only happens in our unobserved mind, when we are unconsciously living through memory or anticipation. It is important to continue taking 3 deep conscious breaths once an hour or more throughout the day. This is how the practice of presence teaches us, through the stillness we create and what we experience inside. That vibrant inner life is God's spirit within us, our inner intelligence. When we start the day this way, it becomes our foundation. We know exactly what we're looking for then and throughout the day. This is the first part of inner conditioning, which is essential. That is what renews us throughout the day. You have completed the morning practice. Now continue taking 3 conscious breaths or more every hour to renew yourself.
Welcome back, brothers. You know, I want to start this evening's program with a little, it's named on our outline here, acknowledging God's intimacy within us. And this comes to mind as one of the hosts of this workshop. It's real important to me, and I know to Mark and Chester as well, and even Jim, that, you know, everybody feels very welcome and, you know, is able to show up as they need to for this program, and that it works for them, hopefully. And I bring that up again because I know that the language that Jim uses in choosing presence and in his teaching of the practice of presence is very Christian. It's rooted in his own Catholic faith and his experience and the things that he really brings to bear as he's written this book for us. And when I'm even too, as we prepare for this, I looked at this, you know, from my perspective. You know, I kind of saw in everybody a reflection of my own understanding of things. And I've had the good fortune of speaking to many of you via email, perhaps in our council circles. Some of you men I know have met before, but others are new to me. And I realize that everybody's coming from different backgrounds, different perspectives. Some of you are very familiar with the Lumen and maybe come from areas where there's active chapters, or you've been involved in a lot of the Lumen programs, and others of you haven't. This may be something a bit new to you, and even the practicing meditation or contemplative prayer, centering prayer, that may be somewhat new to you, and to others it's very familiar, something you've done before. So I want to acknowledge that and just say that wherever you're coming from, and that's fine. It really is okay to be here. One of the things I mentioned before about the practice of presence is that the idea here is, at least one of the main ideas for me, is to bring contemplation and meditation out of the head and bring it into the heart, which is kind of the focus of a lot of spiritual work. Let's get out of our mind into our heart more. And last night we had in Southwest Ohio, we try to hold a monthly council. And if you think Southwest Ohio, think Dayton and Cincinnati. We have a pretty active group that meets monthly, with the exception of a couple months a year. And our program last night was dealing with mystics and mystical understanding of God, and the intimacy that the mystics show us, the intimate relationship that we can have with God. You'll hear Jim, as he teaches the practice of presence, talk about how this practice brings us into the present moment and into a much closer relationship with God. So that is the kind of focus. So we wanted to talk a little bit more about that this evening. And so at this point, let me invite Chester in to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Brian mentioned this morning when we were preparing for this that he was reading the morning meditations, right, from Richard Rohr, and this is October 23rd. And in his meeting last night, he talked about a lady. Her name is Mechthild Magdeburg. Okay, and he talks about it, the different mystics. And I wanted to read a part of it here because I was struck like Brian was. He brought it up this morning. It's like, yes, that struck me when I read that a couple of weeks ago. So what she says is that God says to her that he's so freely chosen to be so hopelessly in love with her that he quite honestly doesn't know if he could handle being God without her. So let me read that again. And this is James Finley is explaining this. God says to her that he's so freely chosen to be so hopelessly in love with her that he quite honestly doesn't know if he could handle being God without her. And she says back to God, take me home with you. I'll be your physician forever. So James Finley explains the power of these words is that we're reading them. And as we're reading them, we know that they're true to us, right? They're true to us. And that God doesn't know if God can handle being God without us and our brokenness. It circulates back around and we give back to God the gift that God longs for, which is us. There's a lot there to really absorb. And he further says to sit with Mechthild and to read her is to be taken by the beauty of what she says. It is to sit in silence, and this is what Jim talks about, and ask God to deepen our capacity to realize how the love of which she speaks is already unfolding within us, and how to be faithful to that and carry it throughout the day. So it's really experiencing God's presence, as we discussed, but so deep. And he also states that the very fact that if we're touched by that, the very fact that we're touched by it and its beauty reveals that we're also being drawn into this love, or we wouldn't be touched by it. So if we're touched by it, we're being drawn into it, or we wouldn't be touched by that. So anyway, that's just a mystic that really speaks a lot of what we're talking about as far as experiencing God's presence as deeply as you can possibly experience it.
Thank you, Chester. Do you have anything that you would like to add maybe about that, Mark? You're muted, Mark. I'm sorry.
It's very beautiful. It hit me too. And I know, it just kind of takes me back when I was in my spiritual direction program. And after a year, I realized that I'd basically read stuff by men, not by choice, but that was, my whole wall was full of it. And so after that, I resolved to read a lot more things written by women that were mystics in the spirituality. And it was just like, it was a missing piece for me. When it hit me in the heart, it was like, yeah, there's something that I long for that I didn't know how to name. So that's a personal reflection.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I just would add that, when the reading that Chester shared with you from the daily meditation, and those are Jim Finley's words, he describes what Mechthild had written about her relationship with God. I was actually almost a little embarrassed when I read those, because it's such an intimate language, and the way she talks about her relationship with God is just, as something as a man, perhaps, or, I think that's the perspective, that really makes me feel uneasy or uncomfortable about her words, is it's just so intimate. And it actually inspires me in a way, because I never, as a younger man, never thought about having an intimate relationship or a personal relationship with God. It just wasn't in my experience or my understanding of what was possible. And our council last night in Ohio too really got much deeper. Michael Grom is a part of our council in Southwest Ohio, and he was in council with us, and we found ourselves just really just starting to kind of glow, or I don't know. It was really kind of a beautiful feeling, and we were sharing poetry. The poem that came to mind for me was Hafiz's "I Know the Way You Can Get When You Have Not Had a Drink of Love." So I want to recognize, I think Noah has raised his hand. He'd like to bring something into the circle.
Yeah, just the Mechthild, as I understand it, was not an ordained person. She came to God through her own journey, just like the rest of us. So it's just something to note. She wasn't someone who was, anointed or whatever. She just had her own relationship with God, just like anybody else, So it was kind of cool.
Absolutely. And, I have these moments. I've been working with Jim for a couple of years on the choosing presence and teaching practice of presence. And he talks often about knowing God, and you'll hear him tell the story. I think he's already told it to this group, about how he talked to a Hebrew scholar to ask, what does the scripture say about knowing God? And apparently she told him it was an intimacy. The intimacy, the way she described it to him, was the way a man knows his wife, that kind of intimate relationship. And I've always kind of heard Jim say that, and that seemed a little narrow to me, but not really. I mean, I understand now what he was saying about the intimate relationship. I think Mechthild illustrates it quite clearly. It's whatever you consider to be an intimate relationship, or how you felt in intimate relationships with other people, even perhaps a pet or something, a beloved dog or something like that. So it's given me a little bit more clarity on Jim's teaching and what it means to know God and be in God's presence, what he's teaching.
Yeah.
All right. So we have Jim with, I'm sorry, is somebody else wanted to come in? Okay. We have Jim with us, even though he's not here in person. He and I were able to connect via Zoom last week, and we had another great discussion. I actually thought that our conversation last week was even a little bit better. And of course, it was longer than what we can present this evening. It was almost 50 minutes. And so it's going to be, it's fully available, and it'll be on our workshop page, ohiolumen.org/presence. Just go down to week 5 and you'll find the full video. But I'm going to share the approximately 15 minutes of that video in which he and I converse, sort of a summary about chapter 5 and inner conditioning. And I just want to let you know too, at the beginning of the video that I'm not going to play, he kind of addressed it. He doesn't kind of, I pitched to him some of the questions and things that men brought to us this past week, to have Jim actually chime in and address those as well. So if you contacted me with questions, please know that we did bring those to Jim's attention as well. And if you watch the full video, I think you'll get at least Jim's thoughts on what you asked of us or shared with us. So here we go. Let me call the video up here. I'll want to go into a little bit of chapter 5, because that's our next chapter that we're going to be covering in our workshop. And chapter 5 deals with inner conditioning. So I want to invite you to offer a little bit of a summary of inner conditioning. What that means.
Inner conditioning is, the reason I made a special chapter for inner conditioning is it is vital, okay? It's as I mentioned earlier, it's what allows us to get an inner signal that we are not in reality now. An inner signal from our body that, wait a second, I can feel unease building up, okay? And before it gets into full-blown anxiety and worry and lack of self-esteem and so many other things that are negative, we can stop it at thought, because we have confidence in the power of God's spiritual energy when we bring in stillness with intention. And that's everything.
All right.
Is it perfect? No, life is not perfect. Okay. Can I do presence perfectly? Absolutely not. Probably the only one that ever did presence perfectly was Jesus. But it doesn't need to be perfect in order to change every aspect of our life. And by doing it consistently, we know there's an inner knowing all of a sudden there that says, when I wake up in the morning, okay, now I don't have the running mind, because if it starts running, I can stop it, or I can allow God to stop it through his spiritual energy by bringing in stillness.
This is really the chapter 2 where you talk about awareness. And I see this as a kind of a connection with meditation in general. Is when inner conditioning, you're saying, hey, this is where we can stop and reflect and see all those thoughts that are going on in our mind over and over again. And I think about some of the ways people are taught meditation is to, sort of picture a boat or a river passing by. And every time you have a thought, that's you rushing out to get on that boat. And that if you can be aware of that, then you can jump off that boat, come back to shore, and come back to a place of stillness. I've kind of liked that metaphor over time too. But you're saying the same thing. Basically, you need to become aware of all the chaos and the mental stuff going. If you can't name it, if you can't see it, you don't know it's a problem, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Correct. But here's the power of the practice of presence in a contemplative way, as we do, is your mind is not making you more aware.
Right.
Your body's making you more aware, because it's an inner experience. It's that clear before and after that, if I'm sitting down, no matter what I'm doing, if I'm working, if I feel unease, or any of us feel unease, we absolutely know, if we're practicing presence, okay, I'm going to stop this. This is not reality. I know it's not reality. So as we say in another chapter, the courage to stop negative thinking, that's powerful. Right. And it's not us doing it.
Yes. You mentioned something. You said the word courage, and you actually say in this chapter, you quote Deborah Moffat, who says, courage literally means to take something to heart. Strength is found in the depths of the heart. Sometimes we need to excavate and go deep to find it. I mean, speak to the idea that this practice takes courage.
Okay. Could I ever stand up, look, which I've done 100 times, who knows, maybe 1,000 times in 25 years, and tell people my faults, tell people my fears, tell people my shame? Yes, I can. Why? Because God's Spirit gives us the courage to do what we cannot do on our own. And when we face our false self, our shadow, okay, we face it because it no longer has power over us. Because God has forgiven us. If we ask Him.
Right.
We have to ask. When God forgives us, we're very foolish if we don't forgive ourselves.
Right. You have a section in this chapter called The Pursuit of Peace. And again, you seem to be saying that most of us are too focused on thinking our way into presence, as opposed to clearing out some space and allowing presence to fill us.
Yeah, presence isn't about thinking our way into a new way of living. It's living our way into a new way of thinking.
Right.
Because that's what it is. It's like when if I go back 25 years and I read Richard, I read Tolley, I read St. Augustine, you're trying to make sense of everything. But all of a sudden you start bringing in stillness. Not that you know so much more, it doesn't matter. You know you have access. Yeah. And it'll come in God's time.
Yeah. I hear you. I mean, I can think of so many ways, metaphors of doing that, but it really is about relaxing and letting that come to you. Yeah. Clearing out the space and not overthinking things, not pursuing it like with that it's that same relentless drive that we pursue other things in life.
Yeah. And it's always a constant, it just makes you more humble and more humble and more humble. I don't care how many years you do it. It just makes you more humble because you become more present and become more amazed at what God has done for each of us.
Right.
Love is beyond. I mean, sometimes it brings us to tears as you become still, and the intense love is like unexplainable.
Yeah, I mean, it can lead to a real transcendent moment. This deep awareness, this really beautiful thing that a lot of us have that experience at times. Yeah. Yeah, this is also the chapter where you and I love this because this is my favorite way of checking in and trying to see if I'm present or if I can figure out what is agitating me, what's keeping me from becoming more present in this moment. You talk about the questions, the 3 questions. So I don't know if you want to I can ask you those questions or you can share those questions in your experience. The first one is, am I at peace now and do I know why?
Yeah, the 3 questions are so essential. As I said this a number of times. I started doing that, I don't know, probably 10 years ago, maybe more. I don't know. Today, they are just as powerful as they were 10 years ago. And I repeat them every day. Yeah. There's not too many days I don't repeat them. And when you say, am I present now? And you're breathing as you're saying it, okay? And then you say, second question, how do I feel inside? Okay. Third question, do I have a sense of calm or peace at some level? Now, when I started it 10, 12, 15 years ago, whatever it wasn't always yes at the end, okay? Right. So obviously I kept breathing. But after doing that for 6 months, the only time I get a no is when I do it in the middle of the night and I'm woken up, then I got to just keep breathing. But they are so powerful. And the other questions are also powerful. There's the other set of 3 questions, which come up in another chapter.
Right.
When I am at peace, do I know why? Again, we're breathing in as we ask the question. When I am not at peace, do I know why? Third question, as we're breathing, when I'm not at peace, do I know how to get back to peace? When we can answer those questions through our own experience, there is nothing more powerful in our lives than that.
Right.
Because think about it. If we know when we're not at peace, how to get back to peace, wow.
Yeah.
What's more powerful? Tell me what's more powerful than that.
Well, what's so powerful too for me, these questions, they're really touched on. If I get to that first question where I ask myself, am I not at peace? Because I recognize something in me recognizes I'm not, or that something has me. I know that if I get just that foothold or that grab, that first question, then I'm on my way back, because automatically the breathing starts. And automatically by asking those questions, I can see what it is that's got me so agitated or disconcerted or desperate or whatever it is. And to create some space.
By the way, not to interrupt
Oh,
you. You just named it. You just named inner conditioning. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's such an important part of this practice, to be able to realize that. Anybody who's really, gone on a journey of this nature, if they can get to that question, it's like home base. It's like finding, the key or whatever it is, just
right.
because that really will give you that, get you back into the space of presence that you otherwise couldn't get into. Yeah.
And not only that, let's say you got a rough day, you got a dry day, you're not really doing your practices, you got a problem and you're worried, instead of doing the practices, you're worrying, okay? And you say, well, let me bring in some stillness. Let me bring in stillness and ask God, put my trust in God. See, but your ego's telling you, nah, that ain't gonna work. No way. That ain't gonna work now. Then you do it. And then you feel that vibrant inner life. You now took a step to where you didn't think you ever could be.
Right.
And
Right.
that's inner conditioning. If you're not doing it consistently, guess what? You're not going to get true inner conditioning, and you're going to blame the practice on it.
Right.
So it's not the practice that's the problem, is that we're not doing the work of the practice. That's the problem. And I say that confidently for this reason, because God never leaves the present moment, period. So it's not up to us. We're not doing the changing. All we have to do is show up through stillness with intention.
Yeah, when you there's a corollary to this too. When you practice inner conditioning, and when you truly find yourself in those moments where you're able to restore some presence by asking these questions and breathing, you're able to see it in other people too. You're able to look at the world in a more empathetic way, and you'll see people, and I would call it unconsciousness. So many people acting, going through life in a state of unconsciousness where they're not present. They're not even aware of that. And that may be a possibility, for connection with other people too, in which you can help them as you yourself are seeking presence and inner conditioning. But anyway, I mean, at least it's given me some peace, just knowing that, other people too that do awful things or things that are happening in this world can, this practice is accessible to them as well. And it changes things. It changes ourselves individually. And then ultimately from that, it goes out and changes the world.
Oh yeah. Look, I was in the jail ministry for 23 years, doing services and teaching presence.
Right.
I left jail 100 times, 200 times. I mean, really depressed. You hear some of the stories, and it's depressing. It's deeply depressing, right. And there's nothing you can do about it. It's like, but we feel our brother's pain, but at the same time, we know that God will change that pain. And when we realize that that person who's suffering has an opportunity to be free inside and to feel a sense of love and connectedness, that's what keeps you coming back.
Right.
Okay. And hey, I mean, obviously, I don't know what a success rate what it is, the thousands of men in prison, but I know one thing: if it was a handful, it doesn't matter.
Right.
It was worked every hour, every day, whatever it was.
Well, it really does make a difference. It's made a difference for me, and I know it's made a difference for so many other people as well. And I thank you for this rich discussion that we've had this afternoon. And you know, you talking to some of the concerns and things that men have spoken into our workshop, but also our discussion of inner conditioning, chapter 5. Jim, is there anything else that you would like to add? You know, before we stop recording.
The main look, as I say over and over again, the practice, when we do it correctly, is always and will always be putting our trust in God, putting our trust in Jesus. That's what it's about, period. It's not what we do, it's what's being done to us as we bring in stillness with the right intention.
Brothers, I hope that the discussion of chapter 5 is helpful to you. If I could just get Jim to, I love his excitement and enthusiasm for the practice and for teaching. If I could just get him to sit on his hands a little bit. He likes to use those to make points. And I do want you guys, if you have the opportunity, to go out and view the first 30 minutes or so of this video. We talk about things like vibrant inner life, doing the hourly practice, getting relief, other practices that support presence, the clear before and after, that idea. We talk about the power of intention, humility, choosing presence in the Christian tradition. We talk about dry periods, periods where, you know, even if you have a healthy practice, sometimes there are those moments where you are dry or struggling with it. Personal relationship with God, resistance, which is actually chapter 6, stillness, and of course we do the chapter summary. So Mark, if you're ready, could you read the making meaning of the message for chapter 5, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Let's see. Yeah, okay. Inner conditioning is at the heart of practicing presence. Sorry. Without doing it consistently to start the day and throughout the day, we will not have confidence in it. It is our inner experience of calm and peace as we bring stillness that keeps us returning to the present moment. In other words, it is the practice that teaches us, or I should say, it is the practice of bringing in stillness that allows God to teach us. As Jesus said in John chapter 6, verse 45, they shall all be taught by God. We all want God to reveal himself to us and teach us in our daily lives. But we have to remember, God's Spirit is always in the present moment. And unfortunately, most of us are rarely in the present moment. Inner conditioning ourselves through the practice of presence keeps us close to the space where God can teach us. The always accessible present moment where he resides. And through his grace, we have a choice.
Thank you, Mark. Brothers, we're about to go into councils. I just want to make a quick comment that room 4, you only had a couple men show up from your council group, so we separated you into rooms 3 and 5. So you might be with some new faces this time. Sorry about that, but we want to make sure that there's at least 4 guys in each room. Makes it a little bit easier. And Chester, can you remind us again of the 4 intentions of council before we break into groups?
Yep, well, Brian's setting that up, and I've mentioned before, you know, first rule is to listen from the heart, speak from the heart, be spontaneous and authentic, and be lean of expression. And we've got 4 questions or 4 prompts today, and it's okay if you don't get through all the 4. I mean, if you get, and I know our last group that I was in last week, we didn't get through all of them. I mean, you just get into a deep discussion and let it go from there. And I also talked before, and I know Jim talked about journaling. I mean, if you haven't started journaling, I would highly recommend it as part of your spiritual life, not only for this course that we're taking now, but just in general, write down your thoughts, and you'll be amazed over time how you can actually see how you're changing over time. So highly recommend it. I know that you can use a notebook or a small journal, an iPad. Some people can journal electronically as well, and that works for them. So whatever works for you.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Chester. So, brothers, I put the questions from the journaling in our chat, so you'll have those with you, hopefully. And we'll be going for 35 minutes, and then we'll come back to the main room. So here we go. Welcome back, brothers. Hope you've had a wonderful council experience this evening. Again, it was so great to have you with us tonight. We're really grateful for your presence here and the time we spent together. For next week is Thanksgiving week, and we understand a lot of people will be busy, but we meet on Monday nights, so hopefully it is still working to your schedule, that you can join us on Monday before some of the holiday busyness catches up with us for the week. And of course, we hope that whether you're here or not, that you're able to be present throughout this holiday season. The next chapter is on resistance, and that's chapter 6. So if you have the chance over the next week, if you can kind of spend some time with chapter 6 and read that and your journaling questions. The journaling questions are already available at our website, ohioillumin.org/presence. At the top of the page, click on week 6. It'll take you right down to where you can download the PDF of those questions. Also, too, everything from tonight's session will be on week 5 tomorrow. A lot of stuff is already there. So if you go there tonight, you can pick up the poem, the video that I showed, and we'll put a little bit more. We'll put tonight's session on there tomorrow and have that ready for you. So again, keep using the Practice of Presence app. If you have any questions or any thoughts or anything you want to share with us, you can reach out to us, answers@choosingpresence.org. That'll reach myself, Chester, Mark, and Jim. We hope that Jim will be back with us next week. Jim certainly brings a lot of energy to our session, so that'd be great if he could be with us. I'm not certain yet, but hopefully he will be. And Mark, Chester, before we close here, do you have anything you'd like to add? Oh, okay. All right, brothers. So just take a moment of silence here, and feel free to blow out your candles and just leave in quietness. And if you want, you can stick around afterwards if you want to talk to me, Chester, or Mark. Thank you, brothers. We'll see you next week. Peace.